Hi, my name is George W. Bush, and I used to be your president. Hi, I'm John Morgan, and I'm an influencer. The story that's on the tip of my tongue takes me all the way back to the age of 6. Because I wanted to be an influencer before I even knew what that word was. I loved to sing to people, to make them smile. When I got to school, I ran into a bunch of bullies that told me what a loser I was, told me what a joker I was, what a failure I was. I mean, they called me everything under the sun to belittle me, and I became like that go-to guy because I was sensitive. I was tender-hearted, and I would cry very easily, and there's nothing that brings greater satisfaction to a bully than to make someone cry. So my own self-script changed, and I turned into somebody who was afraid to speak, who did not feel worthy of offering anything to anyone else. And I went through my whole school years kind of in that posture. And after I came into a place where I found my voice again many years later, I very slowly began to share content. I was a singer-songwriter, so I would write songs that could have impact for people's lives. But even then, there was just a lot of trepidation with it, mixed with it, because of all of that negative branding that I had encountered as a child. But little by little, I took risks, and every time it seems like I took a risk, I was rewarded. And I had some major setbacks. I got booed off the stage on America's Got Talent. But there's a story behind that. It happened because I was ill-prepared. I take the hit for that. It was my own fault. And that's a whole big story. When I first walked out, see, the episode was being filmed in Dallas, Texas. And of course, I am a George Bush impersonator. So that's what I was doing. That's what I was walking out to do. And as I walked out, it was just about the time that George Bush was finishing up his second term in office and was moving to Dallas. And so he was all in the news and a big deal. And so when I walked out on that stage, I'm sure people assumed that it was just George W. stopping by to say hello, because people sprang to their feet and started cheering and clapping and shouting, and it was like, oh, the biggest high I've ever experienced. But I failed to recognize what was going on. I failed to enter into that moment with that audience. And instead, I just began my canned presentation that had nothing to do with this amazing euphoria that's going on. And people thought, that's not George Bush. That guy's not even any good. This is horrible. Boo, boo. And so this huge high turned into a horrible defeat. And I went back to my hotel room later and asked myself, what did you learn? And I learned 2 things, 2 key points, and this is a teaching that I share. Number 1, it's not about you. It's about your audience. It's about the other guy. And number 2, always bring your A game.
Please help me welcome a man who needs no introduction.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is good to be in the great state of Texas. So this is what it's like to get an applause in Washington, D.C.
My wife and I were in New York City, and the thought occurred to me, what if I could get onto The View? Just serendipitously, you know? So we found out where they were taping it, and my wife and I went down there, and it was really fun. There was all these ladies with their little tickets to go in the show, standing in line, and my wife and I just thought, well, and we were making it up as we go. We had no plan, no idea what we were going to do. We walked around all these ladies, and it was so fun because as we were walking, I could hear, you know, in the back of my head, Bush, Bush, is that President Bush? You know, and I had another guy with me being kind of a Secret Service agent, you know. And so we get to the front of this line, and there are these double doors to enter the ABC studio where they taped The View, and there was a security guard standing there at the door, guarding the door. And I thought, took a deep breath, it's now or never, it's gonna work or it's not. I just walked up to the door, looked him right in the eyes, gave him a little nod, opened the door and just walked right in. went over to the desk and looked at the girl behind the counter and said, I need to get on The View today. And she looked up at me and the color just drained right out of her face. You know, she's like, that's not how it works. And I said, well, sure it is. See that camera? They're looking at me. Give them a call and tell them the president wants to see them. And so next thing I know, the producer comes down. Of course, they realize I'm not really George W. Bush because there's one little Secret Service agent and not 10, you know. And but they put me on the show. They put me on the show that very day. It was so fun. And then the next day, one of the security guards said, would you like to be on Regis Philbin's show tomorrow? And I said, sure, you know. And so, you know, this could be a ball getting ready to roll. And so the next day I went down to the Regis show, and unfortunately that security guard had called in sick. So they didn't know who I was. They didn't know I was coming, and they said, nah, why don't you try Tony Danza, he's next door. And I'm like, okay. So it was a snowy day in New York City, and we're out on the sidewalk, and in Tony Danza's studio, the door wasn't even really a door. It was just this like opening in the wall. And so I stood there and I said a little prayer and I said, Lord, your will be done, help me with this. And the first person to walk up to the door, I said, can you help a brother out? I want to meet Tony Danza. And the guy looked at me and I look like George Bush. He's like, holy cow. He says, wait right here. Turned out that he was Tony Danza's personal assistant. 45 seconds later, he comes walking back out with Tony Danza himself, the actor and talk show host. So he says, oh, we got to write a script. We got to do something right now. And so he and I, in real time, just wrote a quick little script, and he started his show with it that very day. And then we were, of course, invited to be guests on the show. It's so fun. You know, I want to say, Thomas, I spent most of my life believing that I had nothing to offer. I had no clue that any of what's going on in my life could possibly happen or be real. Much of it I've made up because, you know, there are no impersonator motivational speakers, you know, that you really see out there that also sing and play and do all these crazy things. And so I've carved my own way. And your listeners, your viewers, your own audience, your tribe, they may struggle to believe that they have a voice, but they do. Their voice will find the audience that resonates with who they are. And so I've been looking for my tribe. And so I'm building a website that allows people to let me know they're there so that we can have a two-way conversation, you know, and I can reach out to them and they can say, hey, I found you. And we can begin to connect with each other through a blog that I have written inconsistently in the past, but now we'll do with much greater consistency, a podcast that I have already I've recorded four episodes of, but we haven't launched it yet, so that's up and coming. 2 books that I've written that are available on Amazon. You know, the first one was written as a result of the question that people most often ask me, which is, how did you get started? And so I wrote a book called My Life as a Bush. And it's kind of my story. The book also has devotional content in it too, because in my mind I thought, if I only ever write one book, I want it to be an authentic book that tells my unique story. I've overcome a lot of fear and chronicled how I did it so that I can serve other people. So there's the book, the 2 books, and then of course there's audiobooks that go with those. And then ultimately I want to have some webinars, some teaching moments, some online courses that I develop, and all kinds of things that I'm going to be depending on you to help me share with the world. If somebody is hungry or passionate about the message that they have to share, or even pondering whether or not they even have a message. But the voice, the anxiety of fear, tells them no. Either there's an unworthiness factor, maybe there's a self-condemnation factor, or there's just such a fog about how to do it that makes you just not take action. My advice would be, you don't know what you can learn until you set out to learn it. Much of the fear and unbelief is easily repaired, is easily changed with knowledge and with experience. You know, do it wrong until you do it right. And that's what I've found. My kids bought me a ukulele and I'm like, I can't play that. But I now have a song on YouTube that's got like thousands and thousands of views because I learned how to play it. I just learned. I didn't do it good the first day, you know, but I stuck with it. And so to your tribe, I would say, pursue that passion. Don't become impatient. There's a learning curve. It takes time. You just have to have that pursuit plus time equals accomplishment. And, you know, get your hours in and get out there and make your mark on the world. What's next for me is to launch my online platform. I couldn't be more excited, and I hope folks will look out for it. My name's John Morgan. I'll easily be findable on the web.